Hey there, 09ers. Merry Christmas. It's OC Baker here on Holiday Block Leave, coming in with another video. This time, how not to get lost. Adventures on the Red Diamond. So I got some tips and tricks here, some objective or commonly accepted kind of tips, as well as some more subjective, those that apply for me more than maybe some other people. It really, again, this is a art form. Land navigation more so than a science. There are bits of mathematics involved to some degree, but definitely in a lot of the kind of mental math that's going on here and kind of terrain recognition and association. There's a lot of things that work for you that may not work for someone else. So you can take a little bit with a grain of salt some of the tips and tricks I have. Try it out for yourself. If it doesn't work out, try to do your own thing. First tip is to know your pace count and stick to it. So consistency is key here. So once you've determined that it takes you 75 steps to go 100 meters, don't start changing it. Especially once your 4 hours have started for your land nav course. Do not keep changing your pace count. Stick to it. If you don't have this consistent standard to pace or kind of associate yourself with, to know with confidence that you've run 100 meters, everything else falls apart. So you need to apply it consistently. If you say 75 paces is 100 meters, that's how it needs to be for your entire course. Maybe before you start your the next morning, maybe try to redo your pace count, see if you can get a more accurate count or whatever. But once you start using your pace count, you need to apply it consistently throughout the entire your time on that course. Tip number 2 is another kind of simple, basic thing. It's if you're dead reckoning, stay on azimuth. The second you start veering off, the whole idea of dead reckoning falls apart. Dead reckoning is exactly as it says, is you are moving straight forward, straight line. You're following that. You got that compass right there. Center hold all the way through to your point. The second you start running into trees, logs, ravines, rivers, creeks, and you start veering off and not compensating for it, and in compensating, I mean, like one of the things they'll teach you is you come to an obstacle, you count out how many steps it takes you to move around that obstacle, continue on azimuth, and then how many steps you took to move around, kind of on like this horizontal, I guess, or left and right. You need to do that same thing back. So you end up kind of the same place where you were, just kind of different. There's like a space here where the obstacle's at that you've kind of went around. But you need to be exact with this, because you're going to start veering off, even with little tiny obstacles, but like successive little tiny obstacles you keep veering in certain directions with, you're going to end up maybe even hundreds of meters off, depending how far you're dead reckoning to, off from your point. And when it's in the early morning hours and you can barely see what's in front of you, you being 10 meters, 20 meters off is going to not really help you out. It's going to screw you, and you're going to be in a really bad spot. So definitely, if you're dead reckoning, first of all, make sure it's a very short distance. Do not dead reckon a whole kilometer. But also when you're dead reckoning, make sure you stay on azimuth, and do not, if you're going to veer, you need to make sure you accurately, as much as you can, compensate for that veering towards the left or right, or moving around an obstacle or whatnot. Tip number 3 is watch out for surprise trails. You're going to be in the real world, you're going to see roads, you're going to see trails that are not on your map. So when you're mapping out your attack point, your path to your points, and you end up following some trail, you see a branching path, you take the left one, you're like, wait, this isn't on my map. And it might end up taking you somewhere completely different. Particularly if you pick the wrong one, or the one that was not the one that you intended. So for myself, my experience with it was I was trying to head south, and from Red Diamond Road, taking this one trail, it was dark. The trail I took, I thought it was the main trail. I didn't even see the actual trail that I was on my map. What I saw was the more obvious new trail that wasn't on my map. And I ended up following this trail all the way around, and it took me back up north, the Red Diamond Road, right where I started. So you don't want to run into that situation. So if you're going to be taking these trails, use your compass, use your pace count, use terrain association. Try to figure out, wait, is this trail actually the one I think it is, or is this taking me in a completely different direction? Tip number 4, plot almost every point you find. So that means plot those points that aren't yours. So you can use them as attack points, use them as backstops. You can use them as a kind of where am I? Here I am kind of point. Because there was many times, again, at night, in the middle of the woods, I can't find my point. But I come across a point. Woohoo, is it mine? Is it mine? No, it's not mine. It's another point. But a lot of the times, finding a point in the woods that's not your point is almost as good as just finding your point. Because a lot of times, of course, it's going to be someone has wrote the grid coordinates on there and a bunch of people have checked them off. So then you can use that and perhaps within the next 5-10 minutes, shoot out an azimuth and boom, you're 100 meters away from your point or less. Whereas you were hitting from an attack point of 500 meters to your point. Now you got an attack point that's only 100 meters off from your point. So again, this one I think is very, very helpful and useful out of probably all the tips, is just plot every point you come across. Maybe not the obvious ones that are at a pretty obvious intersection. Those are fine. You're at the intersection. You can look at the map. You know where you're at. But those that are definitely in the middle of the woods or at kind of weirder intersections or ones that have like trails that aren't actually on the map, for those you definitely want to plot on your map so that later down the road, maybe they're not useful now, but later down, maybe an hour and a half later, those might be useful to you. Tip number 5 is know when to cut your losses. This means if you're spending 45 minutes, an hour, on one point trying to find it, you're lost in the woods going around in circles and circles and circles. You need to give up and you need to go to a different point. Because as long as you have pretty decent memory, you can always come back to that point, remembering some of the paths you've traveled, and then try to knock it out. But this time, you can try to knock it out when you now have 4 points in your hand, as opposed to traveling around in circles and circles for 2, 3 hours, 4 hours, and you run out of time. And this was what a lot of people who were bad at land nav, who failed on the first day, is exactly what they did. They came back at the 4-hour mark with 1 point or no points because they spent all their time getting lost and not being able to find that point. So know when it's time to cut your losses, because you have a little wiggle room here, right? You only need 4 points. You don't need 5. So if this point is giving you so much trouble, just go to a different point. Even if that point looks more difficult on the map, it might not actually be as difficult as you think, and you should probably just go to that one as opposed to wasting all your time on this one point. You know you will probably not be able to find, or it's going to take a significant amount of effort to find that point. Tip number 6 is master the go trail and compass combo. So there's, of course, these trails from the road that lead into woods. And these are created by years of a first candidate, the first student that came out, shot an azimuth from the road, dead reckoned, and found the point. And then there's other candidates and students that came after him, did the same thing. So this makes these trails. With that said, there's also a candidate from 10 years ago that also shot out a compass from the road to try to find the point and did not find the point. And there was other candidates and students that made that similar mistake. So you're going to have these trails made by candidates that lead to points, and you have roads and trails that do not lead to points. So you need to combine these trails with your compass, with your pace count, so that you can utilize both. You can utilize these trails, but always have an idea of how far you're going out, how far you've actually traveled in relation to the map, in relation to the real world, so that you can kind of put in perspective where you're at. Because a lot of times, these trails are going to make your life very, very easy. But you need to use the sanity check of a compass and your pace count in order to make sure you're actually heading towards your point. But of course, even if it doesn't necessarily lead you to your point, like I said earlier, you can use that point that's not yours as an attack point to find your point. Tip number 7, if you got far points, run to them. So you don't ever want to be the guy, 10 minutes late, you got your 4 points, and you end up failing, all because you decided not to run throughout the whole thing. Now, you shouldn't have to run. If you're all right with land nav, you could probably just walk everywhere, get your 4, get your 5 points, and still have an hour or 2 hours left, depending on how lucky you are with your points, kind of composition and where they're at. But if you're pretty bad at finding points, once you've reached your attack point going out, you should probably be running as much as you can, because you know you need that time to find these points. You should not waste time traveling and traversing to those points. You should use that. You should reduce your traversal time as much as possible. Again, it's a zero-sum game. The more time you spend traversing to these points, it's the less time you have to actually go out and search for those points. Tip number 8, less snivel gear, more MRE grub. So again, if you're following tip number 7, doesn't matter, it's the middle of winter. If you're running, your body's gonna be heating up. So this extra warm weather gear, these waffle tops, are gonna weigh you down, and you're gonna make things end up you're gonna be more uncomfortable. It's just gonna be more weight weighing you down, so you're gonna run slower, and you're not gonna be able to run as long. And you can then use that extra space to store your leftover MRE breakfast, so that once you get your 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 points, then you can start eating your snacks and leisurely walking back home with all of your points in hand. Tip number 9 is probably the most controversial of them. So a lot of people, or a decent amount of people, will recommend going out to that furthest point and trying to get that one first. They say this with good intention to people that are bad at land nav, because the idea is if you're bad at land nav in the day, at night you're going to be even worse. So the idea is to spend those nighttime hours traversing. So by the time you reach that furthest point, the sun's going to be out, and you'll be able to see everything, and you'll be able to do basically day land nav on that furthest point. The problem is there's a lot of assumptions here. The assumption here is that furthest point, when it's day out, you'll be able to get it. But someone who's already bad at land nav, maybe that furthest point is actually the most difficult point. So now they just spent all that time traversing to that location, and then they waste another hour plus trying to find that point successfully or unsuccessfully. But as opposed to perhaps getting the closest point, maybe spending an extra amount of time because it's night finding that point. But nonetheless, finding a point within that first hour, and then perhaps now being able to use that to piggyback on another point that's kind of close by. And by the time we're reaching the 2-hour point, you have at least 1 point, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe even 4, as opposed to spending upwards of 2 hours hopefully trying to find this point that's furthest away. And again, this is land nav, especially on Red Diamond, because it's not a very difficult course. It's a test of confidence. It's a test of confidence in your abilities, confidence in yourself. So you coming into the hour mark, the 2-hour mark, with several points in hand, as opposed to none, is going to boost your confidence level. It's going to make you more productive in finding these other points. Because you're going to trust your abilities, and you're going to be able to go out for your 3rd or 4th point, confident in your dead reckoning abilities, confident in your pace count, and then you're going to go out there and succeed, as opposed to sitting at the hour mark, the 2-hour mark, with nothing in hand. So those are my 9 tips for land nav, particularly on the Red Diamond field. So if you guys have any more questions, in particular about Red Diamond, kind of maybe the structure of it, or land nav in general, please let me know in the comments, and I'll either make another video or just answer you directly in the comment section. So thank you, and everyone have a Merry Christmas.